At 10:03 on a Tuesday morning, a legal courier walked into Sterling Capital Partners carrying an envelope that would destroy a billionaire's empire. But Nathaniel Sterling wasn't there to receive it. He was 5 blocks away, tangled in silk sheets with his mistress, completely unaware that his quiet, pregnant wife had just declared war. For 3 years, Genevieve had been the perfect trophy wife, silent, obedient, invisible. What Nathaniel didn't know was that she had spent the last 6 months secretly gathering evidence, recording conversations, tracing hidden bank accounts, building a trap so elaborate that by the time he realized what was happening, it would already be too late. But this story isn't just about divorce papers and stolen millions. It's about a woman who discovered her husband had done something unforgivable. Something so twisted, so calculating, that when she found out the truth, she collapsed for 3 days. He didn't just cheat on her. He didn't just plan to take her baby. He violated her body in a way she never imagined possible. And he thought he would get away with it. He was wrong. What happens next will shock you. It will enrage you. And by the end, it will remind you why you should never, ever underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose. This is the story of how one pregnant wife brought a billionaire to his knees. Lesson and value statement. What you will learn from this story. This isn't just entertainment. This is a survival guide disguised as a story. You will learn how to document evidence when no one believes you. You will learn why financial independence matters before you need it. You will learn that the legal system can be beaten if you know where to look. Most importantly, you will learn that walking away from a toxic situation isn't weakness. It's the first step toward taking back your power. If you or someone you love has ever felt trapped by a controlling partner, this story will show you that escape is possible. Justice is possible. Victory is possible. Meaning of the story. The deeper message, this story is about more than revenge. It's about reclaiming your identity after someone tried to erase it. Genevieve didn't win because she had money or connections. She won because she refused to stay silent. She won because other women, strangers, and friends chose to stand with her when she had no one else. The real villain in this story isn't just one man. It's the belief that powerful people are untouchable. It's the system that protects abusers and silences victims. It's the voice in your head that says you're not strong enough to fight back. Genevieve proved that voice wrong. And so can you. At 10:03, on a crisp Tuesday morning, a legal courier stepped into the marble lobby of Sterling Capital Partners. The 47th floor of the Manhattan high-rise gleamed with the kind of cold elegance that whispered of billion-dollar deals and ruthless ambition. The courier carried a thick, cream-colored envelope, the paper so expensive it felt like holding someone's fate in his hands. He approached the reception desk where a woman with perfectly styled hair and a polished smile greeted him. "Delivery for Mr. Nathaniel Sterling," the courier said. "Personal and confidential. Signature required." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at the name. Everyone in this building knew Nathaniel Sterling. He was the king of this glass and steel kingdom, a man whose very presence could make grown executives tremble. "Mr. Sterling isn't in yet," she said carefully, "but his executive assistant can sign for him." The courier was directed to the corner office suite where Arthur Finch, a man who had spent 8 years managing the chaos of Nathaniel Sterling's life, sat at his polished mahogany desk. Arthur had handled billion-dollar wire transfers without breaking a sweat. He had juggled international crises across 5 time zones. He had deflected calls from scorned lovers and furious rivals with the grace of a seasoned diplomat. Nothing, he believed, could surprise him anymore. He signed for the envelope and watched the courier leave. The package felt heavy in his hands, significant somehow. Protocol required him to vet all incoming correspondence. He slid his finger under the flap and pulled out the contents. The stack of papers was an inch thick. The top page bore a heading that made Arthur's blood run cold. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Sterling. Genevieve versus Sterling. Nathaniel. Arthur read the words 3 times, certain he was hallucinating. Quiet, graceful Genevieve Sterling was divorcing her husband. The same Genevieve who sent lavish gift baskets to the staff every Christmas. The same Genevieve whose soft-spoken calls Arthur sometimes fielded when her husband was unavailable. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. He dialed Nathaniel's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Of course it did. Arthur knew exactly where his boss was. He had booked the car service that dropped Nathaniel at Victoria Ashford's building at 11 the night before. He called again immediately. 2 calls in a row was the signal for emergencies. 5 blocks away, in the penthouse suite of the Pierre Hotel, Nathaniel Sterling lay tangled in silk sheets with a woman who was not his wife. The morning light painted golden stripes across the rumpled bedding as his phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. He was 42 years old, handsome in a cold and calculated way, with gray eyes that assessed everything and everyone as either useful or disposable. Right now, those eyes were fixed on Victoria Ashford as she stretched beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow like a promise. "Your phone?" Victoria murmured, without opening her eyes. "It's just Arthur," Nathaniel said dismissively. "Probably some routine crisis." Victoria was everything his wife was not. Sharp, ambitious, utterly unsentimental. Their affair wasn't about love. It was about combustion, a thrilling game of shared ambition and calculated risk. With Victoria, Nathaniel felt seen not as a husband, but as the predator he was in the boardroom. The phone stopped buzzing, then started again. Nathaniel sighed and reached for it. "Arthur, this better be important." "Sir?" Arthur's voice was strained in a way Nathaniel had never heard before. "Someone just delivered a package. Personal and confidential. It's from a law firm, Hayes and Crawford. And sir, it was sent by your wife, Genevieve." Nathaniel sat up slightly, more annoyed than concerned. "What is it? Some charity foundation proposal?" "No, sir." Arthur's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I've seen the heading. It's a petition." "A petition for what?" The silence on the line stretched for 3 heartbeats. "A petition for dissolution of marriage, sir. Your wife is divorcing you." For a long moment, Nathaniel couldn't process the words. Divorce. It was a concept for other people, for failed men, not for him. Not for Nathaniel Sterling, the man who controlled everything. "That's impossible," he said flatly. She wouldn't dare, but even as he spoke, a cold knot began to tighten in his stomach. He thought of Genevieve, 8 months pregnant with his heir, moving silently through their penthouse like a beautiful ghost. He had always assumed she was content, grateful even for the life he provided. "There's more, sir," Arthur continued. "The petition includes a request for full custody of the child. And, sir, the filing mentions evidence of infidelity." Victoria was watching him now, her hazel eyes sharp with curiosity. "What's wrong?" Nathaniel didn't answer. His mind was racing, calculating, searching for the flaw in this unexpected equation. Genevieve had signed a prenuptial agreement. She would get a modest payout and nothing more. She had no leverage, no power, no cards to play, unless she did. "Get my lawyer on the phone," Nathaniel barked into the receiver. "Richard Grant, conference us in immediately." He ended the call and swung his legs over the side of the bed, his perfect morning shattered. "My wife is divorcing me," he said to Victoria. The words tasting like ash, Victoria raised an eyebrow. She took a slow sip of water from the glass on her nightstand, her expression more curious than concerned. "The quiet ones," she said thoughtfully. "They're always the ones you have to watch." What Nathaniel didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have imagined, was that his quiet, pregnant wife had spent the last 6 months building the most elaborate trap of his life, and he had just walked directly into it. 3 months earlier, Genevieve Hartwell Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Upper East Side penthouse, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter like a galaxy of indifferent stars. She was 34 years old, 8 months pregnant, and more alone than she had ever been in her life. She placed a hand on her belly, where her daughter kicked gently. "We're almost free, baby girl," she whispered. But 3 months ago, freedom had seemed impossible. 3 months ago, she had been exactly what her husband wanted her to be: beautiful, silent, and completely under his control. Genevieve had not always been this woman. 3 years earlier, she had been a rising star in the art world, a curator at the Whitney Museum whose keen eye and passionate advocacy for emerging artists had earned her respect and admiration. She had been vibrant, confident, surrounded by friends who loved her sharp wit and generous spirit. Then Nathaniel Sterling had walked into her gallery, opening, and everything had changed. He had pursued her with relentless, all-consuming passion. 200 roses delivered to her office, a third date in Paris. Grand gestures that swept her off her feet and silenced the warnings of friends who thought he was moving too fast. "He's intense," her sister Claire had said. "Be careful, Jen." But Genevieve hadn't wanted to be careful. She had wanted to be loved, and Nathaniel's intensity had felt like devotion. The proposal came after 6 months, a 10-carat diamond that caught the light like frozen fire, and then the prenuptial agreement, slid across a conference table by his lawyers. "Just a formality, darling," Nathaniel had assured her, "to protect us both." She had signed it without truly reading it. She had trusted him. After the wedding, the changes began so gradually she almost didn't notice. Small suggestions became firm expectations. Her job was gently nudged aside, deemed a charming hobby in the face of his monumental responsibilities. Her friends were subtly vetted and dismissed as not being on their level. Her life, once a vibrant canvas of her own creation, was painted over piece by piece until she no longer recognized herself. The pregnancy should have changed things. When she told Nathaniel, her heart had pounded with a mixture of terror and hope. He had smiled that perfect smile, the one he used for magazine covers, and placed a cool hand on her still flat stomach. "A son," he had said, "an heir for the Sterling legacy." He hadn't asked how she felt. He hadn't marveled at the miracle of it. He had simply approved the acquisition of a new asset. That was the night the last fragments of her hope had withered and died. But the final piece of evidence had arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of domestic routine. She had been gathering his custom-tailored shirts for their housekeeper when something fell from the pocket of his suit jacket. A burner phone tucked carelessly into the silk lining. Her heart had stopped. She knew she shouldn't look, but her fingers moved on their own. The text messages spanned 2 years, their entire marriage, messages to someone saved only as V. Intimate details, pet names, plans for secret meetings at hotels mere blocks from their home. Genevieve had felt something inside her go cold and quiet, like a pilot light being extinguished. The hurt, the betrayal, the desperate denial she might have expected did not come. Instead, there was only a strange, terrible clarity, and then she had kept scrolling. and found something worse, a separate thread. Business discussions between Nathaniel and V about the future. Once the baby is born and she's served her purpose, I'll find a reason to divorce her. The prenup guarantees she gets nothing substantial. Then you and I can stop hiding. What about the baby? I'll get full custody. What judge gives a child to an unemployed woman with no career and no support system? I've made sure of that. Genevieve's hand had moved instinctively to her belly. Her daughter had kicked, as if in response to her mother's sudden terror. He wasn't just cheating, he was planning to take her baby. Most women would have confronted him, screamed, cried, demanded answers. Genevieve did something far more dangerous. She started planning. That night, she called the one person Nathaniel had never managed to completely push away. Her older sister Claire, 42, a no-nonsense emergency room nurse in Boston, who had never liked Nathaniel and had never been afraid to say so. "I need help," Genevieve said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I can't explain over the phone. Can you come?" Claire arrived the next day. Genevieve showed her everything: the burner phone, the messages, the plans to steal her child. Claire's reaction was immediate and fierce. "That bastard. I'm going to kill him." "No," Genevieve said. "You're going to help me destroy him legally. Killing him would be too quick." For the first time in months, Genevieve felt something other than despair. She felt the first sparks of a fire she had thought was extinguished forever. She was not going to be a victim. She was going to fight. Claire connected Genevieve with Margaret Crawford, a divorce attorney whose reputation in Manhattan legal circles was legendary. They called her the Closer because she didn't just win cases, she annihilated opponents. Maggie's office was deliberately unglamorous, all fluorescent lights and bad coffee. She wanted her clients to know she spent money on winning, not decorating. She was 58 years old, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "The prenup is airtight," Maggie said after reviewing the documents. "I've seen Richard Grant's work before. He doesn't make mistakes." What if the prenup was based on fraud? Genevieve slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents she had found hidden in Nathaniel's home safe. She had guessed the combination on her third try, his mother's birthday. Narcissists, she had learned, were depressingly predictable. The documents revealed an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands, established 2 years before their marriage. Initial investment of $500,000. Current value, according to the financial statements, approximately $94 million. This asset had never been disclosed during their prenuptial negotiations. Maggie's eyes widened as she reviewed the papers. A slow smile spread across her face. "Miss Sterling," she said, "this isn't just leverage. This is a nuclear weapon. His failure to disclose an asset of this magnitude constitutes fraud. It invalidates the entire prenup. We're not fighting for scraps anymore. We're fighting for half of everything." For the next 3 months, Genevieve lived a double life. By day, she was the perfect pregnant wife. She smiled at Nathaniel's business dinners, laughed at his jokes, never questioned his late nights or sudden business trips. "You seem different lately," Nathaniel observed one morning over breakfast. "Happier." "I'm just excited about the baby," she lied smoothly. By night, she was a spy in her own home. She photographed every financial document she could access. She recorded conversations, knowing that New York was a one-party consent state. She built a meticulous timeline of his affair with the mysterious V. She transferred small amounts from their joint account to a hidden account she had opened under her maiden name, never enough to notice. Through careful investigation, she discovered that V was Victoria Ashford, 31, a senior associate at a rival investment firm. But that wasn't the shocking part. Victoria was the daughter of William Ashford, CEO of Ashford Capital, Nathaniel's biggest competitor and someone he had been trying to destroy for years. The affair wasn't just infidelity. It was corporate espionage, wrapped in silk sheets. Victoria and Nathaniel had started their relationship at an industry conference 3 years earlier, before Nathaniel had even met Genevieve. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had never been his great love. She had been his cover story, a respectable wife to hide behind while he played dangerous games with his rival's daughter. "So let me get this straight," Claire said one evening as they reviewed the evidence together. "He's cheating on you with his business rival's daughter, while simultaneously trying to destroy her father's company, while she's feeding him insider information, while you're pregnant with his baby, while he's planning to divorce you and take custody?" "Yes." Claire shook her head in disbelief. "This man's scheduling skills are honestly impressive. Evil, but impressive." Despite everything, Genevieve laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in months. As her due date approached, the final pieces of her plan fell into place. Maggie had prepared the petition with surgical precision. Every allegation was documented. Every claim was supported by evidence. The filing would be devastating. But Genevieve wanted more than devastation. She wanted humiliation. "I want the papers served to his office," she told Maggie. "Not the penthouse, his office." "That's unusual," Maggie said. "Any particular reason?" "He's never home on Monday nights. He's always with her." Genevieve's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I want the papers to arrive while he's in her bed. I want his professional world and his secret world to collide. I want him to know that I see all of him, and I want him to know I'm not afraid." Maggie studied her for a long moment, then nodded with something like respect. "You know," the lawyer said, "when you first walked into my office, I thought you were another society wife looking for a quiet settlement. I was wrong. You're a general planning a war." "No," Genevieve said. "I'm a mother protecting her child. That's far more dangerous." The morning of the delivery, Genevieve woke at 5 in the morning. Nathaniel's side of the bed was cold and undisturbed. His text from 2 in the morning read, "Unexpected client dinner." Staying at the office, she knew exactly where he was. She moved through the penthouse one final time, saying goodbye to the prison that had masqueraded as a home. She paused at their wedding photo, two strangers smiling at each other. She picked it up, studied it, then placed it face down. "I'm not sorry it's ending," she said to the empty room. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see what was right in front of me." At 9:30, she made the call to the courier service. "The package is ready," she said. "Sterling Capital Partners, 47th floor. Personal attention of Mr. Nathaniel Sterling. It's time sensitive." She hung up the phone and looked out at the city awakening below. Her hand rested on her belly, where her daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her mother was about to burn their world to the ground, not to destroy it, to rebuild it. The first sign that something was wrong came 48 hours after the papers were served. Genevieve was in a modest Brooklyn hotel, the last place Nathaniel would think to look for her. Claire had taken a leave of absence from work to stay by her side. Maggie called every few hours with updates. "He's panicking," Maggie reported. "Richard Grant has already made 3 calls to my office. They're trying to negotiate." Genevieve allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. The first strike had landed exactly as planned. But Maggie's next words carried a warning. "Enjoy this tonight, because tomorrow he's going to fight back. And men like Nathaniel Sterling don't fight fair." She was right. 1 week later, Genevieve tried to pay for groceries at a small market near the hotel. Her card was declined. She called the bank, her heart beginning to race. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling," the representative said. "Your accounts have been frozen, pending the divorce proceedings. Your husband filed a motion claiming the accounts are marital assets, subject to litigation." "But I have nothing," Genevieve said, her voice rising. "I'm 8 months pregnant. I have $43 in cash." I'm very sorry, ma'am. There's nothing I can do. She hung up and called Maggie. It's legal, the lawyer confirmed. Aggressive, but legal. He's trying to starve you out. Force you to settle on his terms. What do I do? We fight it. But these motions take time. In the meantime, do you have anywhere to go? That afternoon, the hotel manager knocked on her door. Mrs. Sterling, I'm very sorry, but there's been a problem with your reservation. We need the room for another guest. Genevieve understood immediately. Nathaniel owned a stake in this hotel chain. He had found her. Come to Boston, Claire urged over the phone. You can stay with me. If I leave New York, it looks like I'm fleeing. It could hurt the custody case. That night, Genevieve checked into a women's shelter in Queens. The shelter was a world away from the marble and silk of her former life. The rooms were small and spare. The beds were narrow. The women who filled them carried stories of survival that made Genevieve's own struggles feel almost small. She sat on her assigned bed, still wearing designer clothes that now seemed obscene, and tried not to cry. A woman in the bed across from her looked up from the book she was reading. Rosa Martinez was 45 years old, with kind eyes and a voice roughened by years of hardship. First time? Rosa asked. Is it that obvious? Honey, you look like you just fell off a yacht. Rosa smiled gently. But don't worry. Whatever he did to you, you're still here. That means you're stronger than you know. Something in Rosa's words broke through Genevieve's carefully maintained composure. She began to cry, really cry, for the first time since finding that burner phone. Rosa moved to sit beside her, saying nothing, just offering the comfort of presence. Let me tell you something my mother told me, Rosa said finally. When a man tries to make you small, it's because he's afraid of how big you really are. You being here? This isn't weakness. This is strategy. You're regrouping. And when you come back swinging. Genevieve wiped her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You've got a fight ahead of you. But something tells me you're going to win. The next morning, things got worse. Claire called at 7, her voice tight with anger. Don't look at the internet. Of course, Genevieve looked. The headlines hit her like physical blows. Sterling wife's secret past. Friends reveal gold digger history. Pregnant socialite abandoned elderly mother, sources say. Is Genevieve Sterling mentally stable? Experts weigh in. The friends quoted were women she barely knew. Society acquaintances Nathaniel's PR team had clearly paid to spread lies. But the worst headline made her stomach drop. Sterling wife had abortion at 22. Records show. It was true. She had been in college. It had been a painful, private decision she had never discussed with anyone, and now it was splashed across tabloid websites for the world to judge. How did they find that? She asked Maggie. Those records were sealed. Nothing is sealed when you have enough money, Maggie said grimly. I'm sorry, Genevieve, but this is what we're up against. 3 days later, the police arrived at Claire's apartment where Genevieve had temporarily relocated. Mrs. Sterling, we've received a report that you may be a danger to yourself or others. We need to escort you for a psychiatric evaluation. What? Genevieve's hand went instinctively to her belly. Who made this report? It was anonymous, ma'am, but given your condition, we have to take it seriously. She spent 72 hours in a psychiatric hold while doctors evaluated her mental state. They found nothing wrong. She was released with a clean bill of health. But now there was a record, a paper trail suggesting instability. Another weapon for Nathaniel to use in the custody battle. Back at Claire's apartment, Genevieve sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I did everything right, she said, her voice hollow. I gathered evidence. I hired the best lawyer, and he's still winning. Maggie, who had rushed over the moment Genevieve was released, leaned forward. He's not winning. He's fighting dirty. There's a difference, and we're not done yet. What else can we do? He has unlimited money. He has the press in his pocket. He has judges who owe him favors. He doesn't have the truth, Maggie said firmly. And he doesn't have what you have. What's that? Women who are tired of watching men like him win. At her lowest point, help arrived from unexpected places. The first call came from a number Genevieve didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Mrs. Sterling? This is Martha. Martha Sterling, your mother-in-law. Genevieve's breath caught. Martha Sterling had always been a distant figure, elegant and remote, moving through society events like a ghost. She had never shown Genevieve warmth, but she had never shown her cruelty either. I saw the news, Martha continued. I know my son. I know what he's capable of. I've watched him become his father, and I've said nothing for too long. Why are you calling me? Because I won't testify against him. He's still my son, and I'm not brave enough for that. But I can tell you where he keeps his real records, the ones he hides from everyone. Martha provided information about offshore accounts, paid-off officials, and secrets buried so deep, Nathaniel had forgotten they existed. Why are you helping me? Genevieve asked. Because someone should have helped me 30 years ago, and no one did. Because that baby you're carrying deserves better than being raised by a man like my son, and because I'm tired of being complicit in his cruelty. The second call came from Diana Rothschild, a society woman Genevieve had met only a handful of times at charity galas. My ex-husband was best friends with Nathaniel, Diana said. He used to brag about how Nathaniel handled his first fiancée. Her name was Caroline Price. She didn't just leave him. He destroyed her, made her sign an NDA with a massive payout. But she's still out there somewhere. Find her. The third ally emerged from the most unlikely place. Rosa from the shelter found Genevieve in the common room one evening. My cousin works in medical records at a hospital uptown, Rosa said quietly. If your husband's been hiding assets, he's probably hiding other things too. Medical things, insurance things. Let me make some calls. Rosa, I can't ask you to risk your cousin's job. You're not asking, I'm offering. Rosa's eyes were fierce. You think you're the first woman I've seen come through here running from a rich man who thinks he owns the world. You're not. But you're the first one I've met who might actually be able to take him down. So let me help. Let us help. Genevieve looked around the shelter at the women who had so little and were offering so much. I don't know how to thank you. Win, Rosa said simply. That's how you thank us? Win. 2 weeks later, Genevieve sat in Caroline Price's living room in a small town in Vermont. Caroline had changed her name, changed her appearance, built a quiet life far from the world of Manhattan power and money. I signed an NDA, Caroline said nervously. I could lose everything if I talk. I'm not asking you to testify, Genevieve assured her. I just need to know what happened. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Caroline's story unfolded slowly, painfully. She had been engaged to Nathaniel 12 years earlier. When she discovered he was cheating, she tried to leave. He responded by destroying her career as a journalist, getting her blacklisted from every major publication. He turned her family against her with carefully constructed lies. He threatened to release intimate photos. She took the settlement and disappeared. He's not just a cheater, Caroline said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. He's a predator. He picks women, isolates them, and when they try to leave, he destroys them. You're not his wife, Genevieve. You're his prey. I'm beginning to understand that. Caroline hesitated, then spoke again. There's something else. Something I've never told anyone. What? When I was with him, I got pregnant. I was so happy. I thought it would change things. What happened? He found out, and the next week, I had a fall down the stairs at his apartment. Caroline's voice broke. I lost the baby. The doctors couldn't prove anything, but I know what he did. Genevieve felt sick. Her hand moved to her own belly, where her daughter turned and kicked. You have to be careful, Caroline said urgently. He'll do anything to win. Anything. Rose's cousin came through with information that changed everything. Nathaniel's medical insurance records were 3 years of therapy bills, weekly sessions with a psychiatrist who specialized in narcissistic personality disorder and impulse control. This was notable because Nathaniel had publicly bragged about never seeing a therapist. Only weak people need therapy, he had said in numerous interviews. But that wasn't the biggest revelation. Buried in the same records were payments to a fertility clinic dating back 6 years. The invoices were coded, obscure, but Rose's cousin knew how to read them. Nathaniel had undergone a vasectomy 6 years ago, 2 years before he met Genevieve. The implications crashed over her like a wave. He can't have children, she whispered. If he can't have children, Maggie said slowly, then whose baby are you carrying? But I've never been with anyone else. Only him. That's not possible. Unless someone else was involved. Maggie's voice was gentle but urgent. Genevieve, think carefully. Any medical procedures you don't remember clearly? Anything that seemed strange? Genevieve went pale as the memory surfaced. 8 months ago, he insisted I see his private doctor, said I was anemic, needed a vitamin infusion. I was tired, so I didn't question it. The doctor gave me something, and I slept for hours afterward. I thought it was just the vitamins. I need the name of that doctor. Now. Within a week, they had the truth. The vitamin infusion had been an IVF procedure. Nathaniel had arranged to have Genevieve artificially inseminated without her knowledge or consent. The donor was a 6'2" investment banker with an Ivy League education and no family history of illness. Nathaniel had essentially designed an heir while ensuring the child had no genetic connection to him that could complicate his divorce plan. He had used her body without her consent. He had made her a vessel for his ambitions. Genevieve collapsed when she learned the truth. For 3 days, she couldn't function. This is assault, Claire said furiously. This is worse than assault. We can have him arrested. We could try, Maggie said carefully. But criminal cases take years. His lawyers would delay until the child is grown. We nail him in family court first. This evidence proves he's unfit. No judge will give him custody now. From her bed, Genevieve spoke, her voice empty. It doesn't matter. I loved this baby because I thought she was part of both of us. Part of me, but she's not. She's part of his plan. She's evidence. Claire sat beside her sister and took her hand. No, she's your daughter. She's been inside you for 8 months. She knows your voice. She kicks when you laugh. She's yours, Jen. Only yours. And no man gets to take that away. For a long moment, Genevieve was silent. Then something shifted in her eyes. The despair receded, replaced by something harder and brighter. He wanted an heir, she said quietly. He's going to get nothing. Armed with the devastating new evidence, Genevieve and Maggie went on the offensive. They filed an emergency custody petition based on evidence of non-consensual medical procedures, the hidden vasectomy proving intent to deceive, a documented pattern of coercive control, and testimony from Caroline Price, who had agreed to break her NDA. A sympathetic journalist at the New York Times published an exposé titled "The Sterling Deception: How One Woman Uncovered Her Husband's Elaborate Fertility Fraud." Public opinion swung violently in Genevieve's favor. The hashtag Justice for Genevieve trended across social media. Women who had never met her shared her story, adding their own experiences of controlling men and stolen autonomy. Victoria Ashford's name was leaked to the press. Her father, William Ashford, was furious, both at the public embarrassment and at learning his daughter had been feeding insider information to his competitor for years. Victoria was fired from her firm. Nathaniel's calls to her went unanswered. His world began to crumble. The board of directors at Sterling Capital called an emergency meeting. Major clients pulled their accounts. His own mother publicly distanced herself from him. Then came the settlement offer. Richard Grant called Maggie with terms that seemed too good to be true. $200 million in cash. The Manhattan penthouse. Full custody of the child. No contest on any terms. He's surrendering, Maggie told Genevieve. This is everything we wanted. Why? Genevieve asked, suspicious. He doesn't surrender. Ever. Because if this goes to trial, the fertility fraud becomes criminal. He's buying your silence. Genevieve considered the offer. $200 million. Full custody. Freedom. I'll take it. Papers were drawn up. A meeting was scheduled for the signing. The night before, Genevieve slept peacefully for the first time in months. Claire made celebratory tea. They talked about the future, about the gallery Genevieve wanted to open, about Hope's first birthday party. It was over. She had won. At 3:47 in the morning, Genevieve's water broke. She was only 35 weeks pregnant. Too early. Claire rushed her to the emergency room. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. But when they arrived at the hospital, a man was waiting in the lobby. Even in her pain and fear, Genevieve recognized him immediately. Nathaniel Sterling stood by the admissions desk, flanked by two lawyers. "Hello, Genevieve," he said. "Did you really think I'd let you take everything?" While she had been in labor, his legal team had filed an emergency motion. They claimed the settlement had been signed under duress. They argued that the donor's sperm had been Nathaniel's own, stored before the vasectomy as a backup plan, making him the biological father. They were demanding joint custody. Worse, the judge assigned to the emergency motion was Harold Pemberton, a conservative family court judge known for favoring fathers' rights. A judge who had been college roommates with Nathaniel's father. Genevieve, exhausted from 18 hours of labor, was informed that she had to appear in court in 48 hours or forfeit her custody claim by default. Her baby girl was in the NICU, born healthy but small, needing observation. Genevieve couldn't hold her, could only touch her through the incubator glass. "I just gave birth," she said, her voice breaking. "My daughter is in intensive care, and I have to go to court?" "If you don't," Maggie said gently, "you lose everything." He planned this, Genevieve. He knew when you were due. He timed it perfectly. In the hospital chapel at 4 in the morning, Genevieve broke. "I can't do this," she whispered to Claire. "He wins everything. He always wins. Maybe I should just let him have her. At least she'd have a home, money, a future." Claire's response was fierce. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare let him win. That man violated you. He used you, and now he's trying to steal your daughter. You're not giving up. You're going to walk into that courtroom, and you're going to fight. With what? He owns the judge. With the truth, and with something he doesn't have." "What's that?" Claire took her sister's hand. "Us." The war room was the hospital cafeteria at 6 in the morning. Genevieve, still in a wheelchair and barely recovered from childbirth, sat at a corner table surrounded by the women who had become her army. Claire was there, exhausted but determined. Maggie had arrived at 5 with files and coffee. Rosa had come straight from her night shift at the shelter, refusing to miss this moment. And Martha Sterling, Nathaniel's own mother, sat with her hands folded, finally ready to do more than whisper secrets. I've kept quiet my whole life, Martha said. I watched my husband ruin people. I watched my son become him. No more. She handed over a folder thick with documents. Everything I know. Every offshore account. Every paid official. Every skeleton in the Sterling family closet. Maggie reviewed the contents with growing amazement. This is extraordinary, but it won't matter if Judge Pemberton is in Nathaniel's pocket. Then we make sure everyone is watching, Diana Rothschild said, arriving with 2 cell phones and a tablet already buzzing with messages. I've called every journalist I know, every society writer, every blogger who covers the rich and famous. That courtroom will be standing room only. And I've been in touch with Caroline Price, Claire added. She's agreed to give a televised interview. Her story, the abuse, the accident, everything. It airs the morning of the court date. Genevieve looked around the table at these women, strangers and family and unexpected allies who had come together for one purpose. Why? She asked. Why are you all doing this? Rosa answered first. Because you being here, this isn't about you anymore. You're fighting for every woman who ever loved a man, who thought he owned her. You win, and we all win a little. Martha nodded. Because my son needs to learn that actions have consequences. I failed to teach him that. Consider this my penance. Diana smiled grimly. Because men like Nathaniel think they're untouchable. Proving them wrong is my favorite hobby. Maggie gathered the documents and stood. All right, ladies. We have 48 hours to prepare for the fight of our lives. Let's get to work. The day of the hearing, the courthouse was surrounded by news vans and cameras. The hashtag Justice for Genevieve was projected on screens across the country. Caroline Price's interview had aired that morning, her tearful account of abuse and loss reaching millions of viewers. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. Journalists, society figures, women's rights advocates, and ordinary people who had followed the story all waited to see what would happen. Nathaniel entered with his legal team, 5 lawyers in expensive suits. He looked confident, polished, untouchable. Genevieve entered in a wheelchair, pushed by Claire. She wore no makeup. Her hair was simple. She looked exhausted and real and human. The contrast was devastating. Nathaniel's lawyers presented their case first. They painted Genevieve as mentally unstable, citing the psychiatric hold. They called her a flight risk who had left the state. They suggested her motivations were purely financial. Then it was Genevieve's turn. She had insisted on making the opening statement herself. No lawyers, just her truth. She wheeled herself to the front of the courtroom and looked out at the sea of faces. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a publicist. I'm not even fully recovered from giving birth 48 hours ago to a daughter who is currently in the NICU because I couldn't be there for her first day of life. The courtroom was utterly silent. I'm here because 3 years ago, I fell in love with a man I thought was my partner. Instead, I became his prisoner. She spoke of the isolation, the control, the systematic dismantling of her identity. She spoke of the affair and the plans she had discovered to divorce her and take her child. She spoke of the fertility fraud, the violation of her body, the discovery that her daughter was the product of a scheme rather than a marriage. My daughter is not biologically his. She was never meant to be. She was manufactured because he needed an heir he could control. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. And now he's trying to take her from me, because that's what he does. He takes and takes until there's nothing left. She looked directly at Nathaniel for the first time. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for the right to raise my daughter in peace. That's all I've ever wanted. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. You wanted an heir, you got a fighter, and I'm done being quiet. Maggie rose from her seat. Your Honor, We call Victoria Ashford to the stand. The courtroom erupted. Nathaniel went pale. Victoria had been subpoenaed. She had no choice but to testify. She walked to the witness stand in a designer dress, her expression carefully neutral, but there was something in her eyes, a glitter of satisfaction, that suggested she had been waiting for this moment. Under Maggie's questioning, the truth emerged. The affair had been strategic from the beginning. Nathaniel had approached Victoria specifically because of her father. He wanted insider information on Ashford Capital, and Victoria had been happy to provide it in exchange for his attention and promises of a future together. He told me he would leave his wife after the baby was born, Victoria said. He told me we would be together. He told me a lot of things. And do you have any evidence of these conversations? Victoria smiled. I have recordings. The recordings were damning. Nathaniel's voice, clear and arrogant, admitting to the fertility fraud, planning the divorce, discussing how he would destroy Genevieve's reputation and take custody of the child, and then the final bombshell. He told me he owned half the judges in family court, Victoria said. He said no woman had ever beaten him, and no woman ever would. She looked at Judge Pemberton. He specifically mentioned you, Your Honor. He said you owed his family too many favors to rule against him. The courtroom exploded. Judge Pemberton's face went from red to white. Cameras flashed. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Pemberton had no choice but to recuse himself. A new judge was assigned. Judge Patricia Morrison, known for her fierce protection of mothers and children. 3 weeks later, Judge Morrison delivered her ruling. Full and sole custody to Genevieve Sterling. Nathaniel was granted supervised visitation only, pending completion of a psychiatric evaluation and parenting classes. The prenuptial agreement was declared void due to fraud. Genevieve was awarded 50% of all marital assets, including half of Nathaniel's stake in Sterling Capital Partners. Total value approximately $580 million. Nathaniel was barred from contacting Genevieve directly. All future communication would go through attorneys. He was ordered to pay all legal fees. Mr. Sterling, Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom, you treated your marriage as a business arrangement and your wife as a disposable asset. Today you have learned that people are not property. I hope you remember that lesson. Outside the courthouse, Nathaniel lost control for the first and only time. This is a witch hunt, he screamed at the cameras. This is what happens when the courts are biased against men. I'll appeal. His lawyers dragged him away. It was the last time Genevieve ever saw him. In the months that followed, his empire crumbled. He was indicted for medical fraud and assault. The criminal case would take years, but his reputation was destroyed. The board of Sterling Capital removed him as CEO. He was forced to sell his stake at a loss to avoid bankruptcy from legal fees. Victoria's testimony triggered an SEC investigation into insider trading. Ashford Capital sued him for corporate espionage. The man who had once believed he was untouchable found himself fighting for survival on every front. And Genevieve? Genevieve brought her daughter home. 2 years later, Genevieve's brownstone in Brooklyn was filled with laughter. Balloons covered every surface. A unicorn cake, slightly lopsided, because Claire had insisted on making it herself, sat in the center of the dining table. Streamers hung from the ceiling, and the afternoon sun streamed through windows that looked out on a small garden filled with flowers. Hope Sterling Hartwell, 2 years old, toddled through the party on unsteady legs, giggling at everything and everyone. She had her mother's eyes and a smile that could light up any room. The guests had gathered from all the chapters of Genevieve's journey. Claire was there with her husband, watching her niece with undisguised adoration. Rosa Martinez had brought her family, her youngest grandchild already best friends with Hope. Caroline Price had come down from Vermont, finally healing from wounds that had seemed permanent. Martha Sterling, who had divorced Nathaniel's father and started a foundation for survivors of domestic abuse, sat in a corner armchair, watching her granddaughter with tears in her eyes. Diana Rothschild had arrived with an obscenely large gift basket and stories about her latest society scandal. Even Maggie Crawford was there, though she claimed she never did birthdays. "I'm making an exception," she told Genevieve. "This one matters." Genevieve moved through the party, accepting hugs and congratulations, marveling at how different her life had become. 2 years ago, she had been sleeping in a women's shelter, convinced she had lost everything. She had been pregnant, alone, and certain that the man she had married would destroy her. Now she had a home she had chosen, a daughter who was healthy and happy and loved, a career rebuilding, with a small gallery in Manhattan that showcased emerging women artists, a community of friends who had become family. She had everything that mattered. "Speech," Claire called out, as Hope blew out her candles with enthusiastic assistance. "The birthday mom has to give a speech." Genevieve laughed and shook her head. "I'm not good at speeches." "You gave one hell of a speech in that courtroom," Rosa pointed out. "This should be easy." Genevieve looked around at the faces of the women who had saved her, who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself, who had fought beside her when the odds seemed impossible. "Okay," she said. "One speech." She picked up Hope, settling her daughter on her hip. 2 years ago, I was the loneliest person I knew. I had everything money could buy, and nothing that actually mattered. I was married to a man who saw me as a possession, and I had forgotten that I was ever anything else. Hope grabbed a fistful of her mother's hair and gurgled happily. Getting out was the hardest thing I've ever done. There were days I wanted to give up, days I thought he would win because he always won, because men like him always win. She looked at Claire. "But I had a sister who wouldn't let me quit." She looked at Rosa. "And a stranger who became a friend, who reminded me that being somewhere safe isn't weakness, it's strategy." She looked at Martha. "And a mother-in-law who finally chose to break her silence." She looked at all of them, the unlikely army that had formed around her. "I didn't save myself. We saved each other, and that's what I want Hope to learn, that no woman has to fight alone, that there are always other women who will stand with you, even when the whole world seems against you." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "So this party isn't just for Hope. It's for all of us. For surviving, for fighting, for being here, together, on the other side of the storm." "Hear, hear," Diana said, raising her champagne glass. The toast echoed through the brownstone, followed by laughter and the happy chaos of a party in full swing. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and Hope was sleeping in her crib, Genevieve sat alone in her living room. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet, a peaceful quiet. A small package had arrived during the party. No return address. She opened it now, curious. Inside was a child's silver bracelet, delicate and beautiful, engraved with a single word, Hope, and a note in handwriting she didn't recognize. "You saved yourself. You saved her. You saved women you'll never meet who heard your story and found their courage. Thank you. A stranger who understands." Genevieve held the bracelet in her palm, feeling its slight weight. She thought about all the women out there, still trapped in their own gilded cages. Women who were being told they were crazy when they knew something was wrong. Women who were being isolated from friends and family. Women who were being made small by men who feared their bigness. She wished she could reach through time and space and tell each one of them what she had learned. that the first step is always the hardest, but you have to take it anyway. That documenting everything matters more than you think. That there are always people who will help if you're brave enough to ask. That the quiet ones, the ones who seem beaten down and broken, often turn out to be the strongest of all. Nathaniel Sterling had wanted a legacy. He had wanted buildings with his name on them and an heir to continue his empire. He had gotten none of that. His name was now a cautionary tale. His money had bled away in legal fees. His empire had been parceled out to people who despised him. He was alone in a small apartment somewhere, fighting legal battles he couldn't win, haunted by the consequences of his own cruelty. But Genevieve had gotten something he could never understand. She had gotten a daughter who knew she was loved, a life built on truth rather than lies, a community of women who had become her family, and the knowledge that when she was pushed to the very edge, she hadn't just survived, she had risen. The moonlight streamed through the windows of the brownstone as Genevieve climbed the stairs to check on her sleeping daughter. Hope lay peacefully in her crib, one small hand curled against her cheek, dreaming whatever dreams 2-year-olds dream. Genevieve stood, watching her, for a long moment. "I'm going to tell you this story someday," she whispered. "All of it. The good parts and the terrible parts. How we almost lost everything and how we got it all back." Hope stirred slightly, then settled deeper into sleep. "And I'm going to tell you the most important part, that you were never a scheme or a plan or an acquisition. You were my reason to fight. You were my hope." She touched her daughter's hair gently. "And you always will be." Outside, the city hummed with its eternal energy. Millions of stories unfolding behind millions of windows. Triumphs and tragedies. Beginnings and endings. And somewhere out there, a woman was reading about Genevieve's story. A woman who was trapped in her own impossible situation. A woman who was being told she was crazy, that she was ungrateful, that no one would believe her. That woman was reading about a pregnant wife who sent divorce papers to her millionaire husband's office while he was in bed with his mistress. A woman who was destroyed and rebuilt herself from the ashes. A woman who proved that the quiet ones are sometimes the most dangerous of all. And that woman was starting to wonder. Maybe she could fight too. Maybe she could win. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope. If this story moved you, I have a small request. Hit that like button. Not for me, but for the algorithm. Every like helps this story reach another woman who might need to hear it tonight. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think Genevieve should have done differently, or tell me about a time when you had to fight for yourself and no one believed you. I read every single comment, and your stories matter. Share this video with someone who needs hope right now. You never know who in your life is secretly fighting a battle they can't talk about. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We tell stories like this every week. Stories about women who refuse to be victims. Stories about justice and survival and the quiet strength that powerful men always underestimate. Join our community, because none of us should have to fight alone. Closing statement. Thank you for staying until the end. Your time means everything to us. This content was carefully researched, thoughtfully constructed, and manually edited by our team. We don't use shortcuts or cheap tricks. Every word was chosen to bring you not just entertainment, but genuine meaning and valuable life lessons. We believe stories have power, the power to heal, the power to inspire, the power to remind you that no matter how dark things seem, there is always a path forward. Until next time, remember this. The quiet ones aren't weak. They're just waiting for the right moment to strike. Take care of yourself. and take care of each other.